Hi, I'm John Atack,
I'm Yuval Laor.
and I wanted to talk about Erich Fromm's definition of love, um, and I have a quote from Erich Fromm, with whom anybody who knows me knows I've been obsessed with Erich Fromm for the last couple of years. I'm now 6 books into this thing because I think he put something together that's very interesting. It was incredibly popular. He sold millions of books, and yet and people, Stanley Milgram is an example of the many psychologists who talk about Fromm inspiring them. He's one of that first wave of escapees from Germany who will be the foundation of social psychology, particularly in the US, along with Muzaffar Sharif, who we were talking about before we went on, who was from Iran. But Fromm he's trying to put together this whole construction, and my thought was to go to Yuval and say, look, you've read all this stuff, so tell us.
No, well, not all of Fromm.
Not all the Fromm. You see, that's the advantage
Yeah.
I have, that I've read the Fromm.
There you go. But I read some books about the subject. Yeah,
we're going. My interest is in saying, well, where is anything that he's saying not right? Where doesn't it fit together? And you've already pointed to things which don't attack the main construction of his argument, which is it would be nice to people for our own good, which seems a pretty sensible philosophy to me. But that we need to know how to love. We need to know how to do these things, and that's all very good. But we must always be critically checking the information that supports something. And I think, because you understand the idea of evolutionary development, that's the important concept. Evo, Devo, are we not men? Evo, Devo. Which is the coming biology, the coming way of looking at the world, and I think has made biology definitely the queen of the sciences once again, as it briefly was in the 19th century. Because
or in the 3rd century BC,
and
4th century,
friend of mine who's studying counselling at the moment, and has watched various videos on the channel here, hasn't looked at your presentation, and I must say that if there could only be one thing on the channel, that's what would be on it. There's no doubt about it. That's the most important thing that's on this channel.
Thank you.
And you've broken new ground. You found things out that start to make sense. There's so much this idea of critical thinking. It's all about critical thinking. If you could think critically, you'd be fine. You'd come to the right solutions. We both know that that's not true. I know it.
Well, we don't know what critical thinking is.
Yeah, what do we mean by critical thinking? Critical thinking, reasoning, ratiocination, the cognitive process must be allied to the simple understanding that there is no thought without emotion, there is no emotion without thought, there is no self without mind, there is no thought without mind. There is that basically we've got all of these words that define a process that is being a human being, but they're not. It's only by fitting to, accepting that these things are happening at the same time. The same is true with Evo Devo, accepting that many forces are at work, but emotion and thought are not separable in the human being unless you can kill off the emotional centers in the brain. But first you'd have to find them all, and that might take a little while. So the essential concept to me, since we first met in June 2015 in Toronto, which was great, and I'm very grateful to whichever of the gods actually facilitated that meeting through the careful deployment of the stars, so that it was inevitable it would happen, because it's allowed me to focus on something that's intrigued me since I was about 14. I read the Symposium by Plato. Just happened. It wasn't deliberate. And it was easy to read. It wasn't.
It's fun.
Nasty. It's just fine.
It's got just homosexuality references all over the place.
People like that, yeah. And it's got the idea, when I think it's Socrates himself who says it's possible to love a woman when they've been through all the other possibilities, and they all laugh. But there we get the word platonic love from that particular.
Yeah, which doesn't mean when used today, it's not exactly how it's used.
No,
in Plato, but
inevitably.
Yeah.
But that started me on this idea of, you know, which so many songwriters have also written about, what is this thing called love?
Yeah.
And, or what is this thing called love, depending which part of the world you come from. That then I read about, you know, the Christian agape and caritas and this kind of stuff. And I'm familiar with some of the Chinese, some of the Sufi, which is the Sufis. They're brilliant. They wrote some really clever things, some of these guys. I'm not fully sure I understand them, but they make me have to think about things. And I'm grateful for that always. And I say that as somebody who doesn't believe in God, but doesn't consider himself an atheist. Because he doesn't not believe in God either. You know, I can't, I'm just not, I'm too lazy to actually fight that one out. But at the heart of your work is this notion of love. And I keep coming back to you year in, year out and saying, well, what is this thing called love? So what we have from Erich Fromm is care and responsibility are constituent elements of love, but without respect for and knowledge of the beloved person, love deteriorates into domination and possessiveness. So put forward in sometime in the mid-1950s, that particular one.
In the book, the Art of Loving.
Certainly talks about exactly that definition in The Art of Loving, which I think is 1956, and is his biggest selling book. It sold millions of copies, and quite rightly. And I mean, our conversations, you know, that what I want to do is to find out what's right, what's wrong in it, fit it back together again and say, here, have a look at this, because it might be useful to get a different foundation. It seems to me that psychological thought at the moment, the foundations have become very shaky because all past experiments are unethical. So,
and sometimes invalid as well.
Yes,
or
exactly. There's this
unrepeatable.
balance of, often invalid as well, or tried out on a population of 19-year-old American in the middle class white community, you know. But
so in Fromm's definition of love, there are four elements, right? There is care, respect, and knowledge, and what's the
responsibility.
And responsibility. Now, this I mean, what we're gonna be doing now is you know, an analytical discussion of what the word love means, the way it's used, right? So the question is whether this definition matches everyday use of the word, right? And so, and of course, especially with a word like love, I think when he wrote it, making love was meant kissing,
courting,
or even courting.
It starts as just courting. To make love to someone is to make sweet suggestions to them in the 20s, I think, and 30s, and by the 60s.
Yeah, making love means
having sex, the same as sleeping with somebody, which I've never understood. Because you can't. It's one of the things you can't really do when you're asleep. Well, I can't. I've never tried actually when I was asleep, but
so his use is somewhere in this transition. Now, of course, that was making love. This is not just love. Now, this his use of the word love, is it limited to romantic love? Like often discussions of love, for example,
not at all. He's talking really more than that, or not about that, and talking about, you know, the love, the kind of sibling love for humanity. That's where he will go. That ultimately, wherever you are in that mystical process, he called himself a mystical atheist, of course, to achieving oneness with communion with all of humanity, which I must say I haven't managed yet. I do try once or twice on a Tuesday. Recently, I have tried to be at one with all humanity. But
so his definition of love needs to cover parent to children, parents to children love, children to parents, which are very different, teenagers to parents, which is also very different from the first two.
I see it primarily as a sibling love, because what he's talking about is being grown up. So anything that would be a child to parent should be gone, you know.
So
the focus would be a kind of sibling. We're all equal. We're, you know, it's a full liberal, democratic, and soft Marxist. approach.
And then we have all the love of country, love of God, love of,
Yeah, which would
where
they're
you
against
love.
the love of humanity, so they're not love. That, you know, so you get into this weird place of there's the affection that's felt, but the fervor, which is essential to,
Mhm.
you know, your study of fervor, because that fervor you wouldn't
Yeah.
have been able to study fervor. What can I say? That the fervor is, it's, you know, what you'd feel if you're a patriot, what you feel about an abstraction that you have a love for,
Mhm.
a collective that you imagine, because no two of us imagine it to mean the same thing. My country, what does that mean? Does that mean everything that England has done? Does that mean Agincourt and Crecy? You know, am I responsible for that now? Is there collective guilt going on? You know, should there be a caste system of guilt based upon what our ancestors, you know, whether they had their fingers chopped off by the French at Crecy, so couldn't do that to the bowman on the other side, which is where we're
The
told the gesture comes from, and doesn't
Wow.
mean what rude people say it means. It
Hmm.
means I've still got me fingers, because they
Wow.
cut the fingers off the bowmen when they caught them.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Well, given the
There
choice between that and
wasn't
being
much
killed.
love. Wasn't much love there.
No, but I mean,
So
the other alternative was to kill them. So, you know,
yeah. So the
firm but fair.
if we're gonna give up on the way that the word love is used, right? If we say, all right, so love of country is not really love because it doesn't match the definition, then we're already not doing, regular use of the word analysis, right? That's kind of an analytical
We
philosophy
have
kind
to
of
pull
take.
apart by what people mean by it. What I'm saying is, I think that Fromm was focused, you know, from reading the book around it, that he's pulling that out of the idea that,
Mhm.
first of all, you grow up, which he thinks 60% of people never do. That's the number he gives. Milgram's number, oddly enough, and Schopenhauer's in the 1830s. But 60% of people have a pseudo self. They simply reflect what's going around them. So they don't have care, which is the affection part. They don't
Mhm.
take responsibility. They don't have respect, but they also don't have knowledge of the other. Then
Mhm.
that means that, and so he's talking about a maturity. He's not aiming at a philosophical discussion. He's
Yeah, but this
basically
is not
saying,
a but this
look
is
at it
not a
this
general.
way, and
Okay.
there's possible this outcome. So for him, you then learn to love yourself, which is a concept that rankles with me for some reason, because it seems there's no deliberate process that should be involved in my self-esteem. You know, really, I shouldn't be sitting around saying, how much do I esteem myself? How wonderful am I really? You know,
Mhm.
it's not something I think about. So directing love towards myself, maybe it's my Christian upbringing, but he's saying that it's a point where you realize you're part of humanity, you've grown up, hey, and that then you'll be able to experience what he calls love, not an affection for, not used as the word in its full and broad potential
Yeah,
meaning.
but
I like
the
it, I love it, I love New York, you know, in June. How about you?
yeah.
That it he's focusing and saying, no, these are synthetic, you know, as you show, that
Mhm.
cult belief becomes a synthesis of familial love, or storge,
Yeah,
as we found it is
as we
called.
found, there's a
Yeah,
new a
back to
new word.
1637. Yeah,
Look it
storge.
up. It's a real thing.
It's a real word.
And it means familial love,
Yeah,
or things like that. But
really storge.
when he talks about knowledge, for example,
Mm.
if, the way you describe this love of humanity, that's, we don't know all of humanity.
But it's
So
understanding the humanness of humanity, and it's seeing that
okay,
reflected in others.
so this is
I
not
would say
love
that
of a specific people.
no,
Okay.
no, and it also, he allows for the love of psychopaths and what have you, but he, within his work, as you know, he's the first person to define the malignant narcissist
Hmm.
in 1964 in a book called The Heart of Man, and it's a remarkable book, the way that he finds his way to this, and that he's not concerned with, you know, locking up psychopaths or what have you. He's concerned with doing what's right for society, that will sort such people out if it's possible to sort them out, and otherwise locking them up, which I think is my point of view too. Ted Bundy, lock him up, you know, simple. you know.
So, but we get to a point where not only does his definition of love not fit the way people talk, but it's actually the opposite in a way, because we talk about our loved ones as our special, you know, are my special, um, or
Special
special
needs people.
people who are who are special to us, right? Our significant other. Love. When you love your own child, you see them different than the other kids in their class, and so
Well,
love
they are different.
is.
What can I say, Yuval? You know, it's just
But
obvious.
that normal everyday use of love
Mm.
is to make people not all the same, right? So
Yeah.
I have my loved ones, and then there's the regular ones. And I might love my country, and I might love my football team, and I might love
Grapefruit juice in the morning.
certain cuisines, or
Yeah.
I love summer in the mornings, or
Nice
but
nail varnish. All sorts of things people can love.
but love
There is no nail varnish.
is to designate something that is special. Now,
Mm.
you could say that he might mean, when we talk about the love of humanity, that we see humanity as special compared to other animal species.
Yeah, and then you've got the love of Gaia and the whole universe, of course, which in my brotherhood we practice. And all you have to do, folks, is send in $200 a minute.
Yeah, and then it works.
Yeah, when you've paid enough, it'll suddenly work.
Guaranteed.
Could be a few years.
Yeah.
So,
So the now this word love, which also I brought some books.
Literature.
This is a
Limerence.
classic, Love and Limerence.
Infatuation. Limerence.
Yeah, which is what people call being in love. And there's, this is the new psychology of love, which is.
How old is it?
So I have over here the Psychology of Love, which is the first edition.
Do you have a copy of the even newer Psychology of Love?
This is 2006.
Yeah, so it's already 14 years old, so it should be like the middle-age psychology.
The newer, yeah. Now, in the new Psychology of Love is entirely focuses on romantic love and a little bit on friendship kind of love, but the main focus is by far romantic love, which is very common when
and you and I would tend to view friendship as a form of sibling love. Within that,
a sibling-like, brother-like love.
Yeah, but it's not a different kind of love from that.
Well, it depends on expectations. Sometimes your actual brother
won't be very friendly to you, and at other times,
and you would love them less conditionally. But that could be of course based on cultural effects, and if your adopted brother might be the same as your biological brothers, right? So and fraternities, right? There's brothers in arms, right? In the military, you got brothers in arms. And I do think that sibling love is sort of the most generic of the kind, because the child to parent and the teenage to parent and then the parent to child, which are so different from each other and so different from romantic love, right? And there's so this brotherly love that he talks about is sort of the most basic, but it's still used to differentiate between people who are friends and people who are not friends.
Yeah.
Right. So love in that sense. So if his definition would be an attempt to say what's common to all those different types of love,
it would have to be very different.
It would have to be very different, because now when it comes to limerence, which is infatuated love or the state of being in love, we see a very strange relationship between it and love. Because it is many times the initial stage of actual love, right? So, but it comes with blind spots, right? So limerence comes with blind spots, right? Love is blind, as they say. So we have the most infatuated, obsessive kind of love is the one that based on least understanding of the person that you are in love with or limerent
Yeah. Yeah.
with, which is why Tanov calls that person limerent
Thusly
object.
thusly the phrase "marry in haste, regret at leisure."
Yeah, and there's the joke: why is divorce so expensive?
Because it's worth it.
It's worth the money. Yeah. Because of the size of the mistake that people have made when they were limerent. And she talks about how in a society where people mistake love for limerence, so they get married because of limerence, that's a society where people get divorced when they're limerent with someone else later, right?
Yeah.
So
Or thrown at the stake, depending on which society they're in, obviously. There are
now
older views of divorce in our society.
Yeah.
It really amazed me. It's many years ago when I found out, probably in my teens, I found out that women were the chattels, the movable goods of their husband under English law until some ridiculous time in the 20th century. You know, that or their father, and
in England
you could sell your wife at the market.
You could auction your wife at the market. And there were women who demanded that their husband would auction them because they didn't want, as a form of trying to get away from a bad husband.
I imagine both of my wives would have been very happy to have me auctioned off. But
now, in Plato, Plato points out the interesting insights that Plato points out are, I think they're not as well known as the just platonic love, which is just. And one of his insights is that the person who loves you does not want what's best for you, because and he's talking about romantic love in this case. Now, in romantic love, the person who loves you is more interested in your relationship with them than with your well-being. So the well-being of the relationship is ahead, right? So if someone is romantically in love with you and they think that what's best for you is to be with someone else, they will not try to do what's best for you, or to be what's best for you is to move to another place in the world where you cannot. Now, parental love can be that you want what's best for the kid, even if it means that the kid will be far away, right?
Can be. I like that.
That's right. And it's
sometimes,
with romantic love, we have this problem. Now, in Fromm's definition, it seems like he doesn't allow for this distance, right? If you love humanity, you want what's best for humanity. Now, what's best for your relationship with humanity? Then the
in which
next
case, actually not adding to the pollution of the world by committing suicide would be the, if this is for the good of humanity, there'd be less oxygen wasted, and more phosphorus to return to the vultures that will eat my body at my death.
So that I think that Plato's point that romantic lover and that is a problem that someone who loves you romantic doesn't want what's best for you, and the other point, the important point that Plato makes about love is that when it comes to love, not limerence, love is not based on the properties of the person, right? So in a way that negates Fromm's demand of knowledge, right? Because Plato says, let's say you're in love with someone, and the reason you fell in love with them romantically was because of certain traits. So let's say you start out and you have a list of traits, and that's the person you're looking for. You find someone that's pretty close to it. You fall in love with them, you live with them for 20 years, and someone else passes and they match the list a little better. So you throw away the first person. You're like, all right, found someone that's, then he would say that wasn't love, what you thought it was love. Or if you fall in love with someone because of, their traits, their beauty, their intelligence or something, and then they become disfigured, they become, they have a stroke, they don't have the same properties. If you now leave them, you say, well, then it wasn't love to begin with. Love is one that endures even though the properties of the object that you love change.
Conditional and unconditional love would be the division.
Yeah,
that's
but
made.
it's in a way it seems like let's go back to Fromm's four criteria. There was knowledge,
Yeah.
right? So I guess that could be, and then there was care. That's good. The what were the other two?
Respect and responsibility.
Now, those are all good. Of course, child to parent. You're going to say, where's the responsibility of a toddler to his parents? I mean,
Or the
maybe.
respect, I mean.
Yeah,
but
respect.
He's talking about. He is talking. Let me say again. He's talking about mature human beings and how they should feel. So anybody under the age of 87
now
doesn't apply to.
If we look at the limerence end of the high infatuation love, then it also comes with intrusive thoughts. It comes with people people think about the object of their infatuation all the time. But with the way you love your grandparents or the way you love your uncles, you might not think about them for months at a time or years, but you still love them. If you hear um, in a way, if we do bring it back to looking, trying to look through biology, you could say that love needs to have two modes to it, right? So this love and limerence. One is the sober one, that's love and limerence, where you become crazy. Now, if you look at parental love, you can say there's the parent when the kids are doing fine and they're annoyed. The parent is annoyed by the kids. The parent is, but then there are always the possibility of switching to the infatuated mode. So you hear the kid got into an accident. Suddenly, the kid that annoyed you all the time, now you are like the infatuated person. You have intrusive thought. You can't stop thinking. It affects everything. Now, you could say that this potentiality to switch to infatuation. So I might not think of my grandparents for a year, but then when I heard something bad happen to them, I might spring into this infatuated mode, buy a ticket, go,
Let's do something about it.
And so this potentiality of switching to a more intense mode, which I don't think Fromm's definition of love has, but of course many other definitions of love don't allow for this duality of sober and infatuated modes that can switch back and forth quickly.
Which I think is very important to say and to resonate, to think about.
Yeah.
The extent to which I stopped using the word love in my 20s. I stopped using it for a decade, 15 years, because it didn't seem to me to be a useful word. It covered so much. What you've done is you've pulled out these two things, and I think that the care, in the sense of affection, liking, the simplest of human emotions, that we can cut up into all sorts of, but liking something is therefore loving something, and you've got this incredible three-dimensional spectrum, and so I think it does become very important to go, there is this infatuated limerent state we get into, this excited state, this active state, which
comes with the blind spots, which comes with,
we won't see the faults. We will emphasize the good, rose-colored spectacles and all of that sort of stuff, and we will project into the situation our own personality. It becomes almost a part of who we are to be in that relationship. It's very urgent infatuation. It's doing something.
Yeah, it's Romeo and Juliet kind of a situation, and it's in some cases it demands exclusivity in romantic love, right? Romeo cannot be infatuated with more than one girl. He might be able to be in sober love relationship with more than one significant other, but a parent can love many children at the same time
and change the degree of infatuation according to the circumstances.
Of course, but
in in real life, in good proper life. I mean, if it didn't change, there'd be something wrong, that parents should be concerned about the welfare of their
Yeah,
children.
and
I think that could be a personal thing, though. I see an awful lot of people who get angry with their children, and
and there's historically there were whole classes that would send their children to be raised by other people, right?
yeah, I mean, throughout the
Aristocratic
age of
classes.
chivalry, the age of the courtly love, when your
Yeah,
child was 7, they'd be sent to somebody else. I mean, I think it's almost originally half a hostage situation. We've got your kid, and you know what we'll do. But and they become squires, so
hmm
they learn all the ways of, you know, looking after some knight, and they in turn learn to become just as priggish and inflexible and murderous as the chivalric lord that they
yeah,
serve.
and of course, all the horrible, the worst things ever were done out of love, right?
Yeah,
You know, either love of country, love of your, you know, imagined race, your imagined country, your imagined ancestors. It's
yeah,
uh, people would do atrocities for love, because love gives us a sense of meaning, and people you know, do a lot for meaning. Yeah.
yeah, can be quite helpful.
So I think Fromm's definition is fine, but it's a working definition just for what he says. It's not, you cannot take his definition and say that, you know, that kid loves ice cream because he knows it, he cares, right? Um,
Yeah, I've long felt we need to have separate, you know, in more precise terms. It's weird because if you think of the word brief in the English language, terse, sententious, succinct, or succinct, as some people say, um, short.
or
We have a lot of words.
storage.
Storage. Those words for brief all have a nuance.
Yeah.
When we come to words for humor, almost all of them are negative: parody,
Mm-hmm.
satire, sarcasm, sardonism, ridicule.
Mm-hmm.
What are the terms for being nicely sarcastic? Because sarcasm means bitter humor. There are no, you know, if anybody watching knows and nice words for humor, then that would be useful to me, because I've been looking for them for a long time. That apparently you can't be nice and funny at the same time when you come down to the
Yeah,
words.
I mean, there's puns and stuff. Those are types of
Types
humor,
of it,
not,
and there
yeah.
are words around it like amusement or
hmm
um,
Yeah,
sort of thing,
entertainment.
but the actual thing itself. And similarly, that I'd like to see people talking about stuff so I don't have to. So I'd like to see really long. It's like when at the bunker, you sometimes have 1,000 comments in a day, and it
hmm
makes me feel so insignificant. You know that.
He's talking about the underground bunker, which is
Yes,
a
Tony,
Scientology website.
bunker, which will be in the links in the description below.
Yeah.
I talked with Tony just over a week ago, and
Yeah,
a week
I,
ago
I
we
heard it.
put it up on Saturday, and it's interesting that we passed 1,000 views within 48 hours,
Hmm.
which is quite good for us. Uh, you know, most of the stuff I do, I'm lucky to get any views, frankly. But it's good to see that there's still that solid viewership that is interested in what Tony's up to. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
hope it's not like the two private detectives who spent 24 years following Pat Broker under David
hmm
Miscavige's instructions. This is true, folks. I think the cost to the religious organization, Church of Scientology, was $11 million to make
Uh-huh.
sure that Pat Broker was watched 24 hours a day, just in case he got the 15 missing upper secret
Yeah.
levels, upper OT levels.
He'll slip up and go to the storage place where he keeps that
One
stuff.
day we'll get in there and have a look.
Yeah.
But
Find what superpowers. Yeah.
superpowers. But so no, my point is that I want people to talk about things because it saves me having to think about them. I can then take their ideas. So there was somebody who was talking about training routine zero. You sit 3 feet away from somebody and confront them to use for some hours. That's what it says. You are allowed to blink, contrary to popular gossip.
No, there were like a year or two where you weren't, right? But then
There
it
was,
came
yeah,
back.
there was indeed in the
Yeah.
early 1970s,
Yeah.
and it was blamed on Otto Rose. The order was issued by Hubbard, but it was blamed on Otto Royce, because the first thing you do, as he says in the HCO Manual of Justice, is you put a head on a pike. You blame somebody, because we are the only people in the universe who have the technology to, bring them back again, so it'll be fine, to repair the damage done. So you blame somebody immediately. It's a matter of policy. I mean, they copyrighted it, and we showed in court their copyright wasn't valid, so anybody can republish the Hubbard Communications Office Manual of Justice, which recommends to put a head on a pike as a form of, when anything goes wrong, immediately blame somebody.
It's not very loving.
Patch them up later, because we have the technology. They won't mind. So Otto was the head on the pike for linkless training routine 0, as it was called. It had gone before I joined in 1974, but I did talk with people who did it, and they said there was a timer, and every time you blinked, you had to set it back to 0 and go 2 hours, right? Because 2 hours is the shortest form of some hours you can get, and that's what the bulletin says, some hours. So that's 2 or more. And people would fall off their chairs. They just kind of explode from the excruciating pain of trying to keep their eyes, and they'd hallucinate these mad things.
It's
incredible what you can do just with a simple technique that, and you could buy that as part of a package for just £5 and do that to yourself at that time, along with 5 other drills, including off with his head, thank you, and do fish swim.
That's the TR3.
Yeah, that's taking you up through actually elements of 1, 2, 3, and 4, all in 2 sentences. I'm quick these days.
Buy 1 useless bullshit thing and get 4 free extra useless bullshit stuff.
But when Steve Hassan first saw it was Hannah and Jerry Whitfield, I think, who first demonstrated training routine 0 to him. I'd known him for a couple of years, but he never asked me. And he came away and he said to me, it's the most overt use of hypnosis I've ever seen in a cult. There were originally like 2,000 groups at that time. It's the first thing you do. And it's very interesting. A lot of ex-members will say, but some of the basic stuff's really good. Some of the basic stuff's great. And you're going, the first thing you do is you're taught how to get the Ganzfeld effect working and get your brain kind of wobbling and get to this euphoric state.
And I mean, you're learned to look up words you don't understand in the dictionary. But
it becomes.
They do point you to the wrong dictionary.
But here's the simple thought. Hubbard said that if you have a misunderstood word, you will commit a bad act, an overt against the person or source of this word. He then proceeds to write enough to fill 2 almost 600. I used to say 500 page. But I went and looked at them. 2 almost 600 page dictionaries with words. So when I started, that first course, the communication course, which had TR0 on it, it meant that I'm reading something that says this is called OT-TR0. I'm like, what? Operating Thetan TR0. Operating Thetan training routine 0. What's an operating Thetan? Every sentence of that original bulletin had some piece of newspeak in it. So just it's no wonder that they get so much trouble in the world, because obviously almost anybody that goes there within that first day, they did strip it all down and it's now called beginners training routine 0. It only took about 15 years for them to work out that. My favorite's the policy letter that talks about 14th century psychiatrists, and I spent nearly an hour talking with a NASA PhD, physics PhD, guy who worked for NASA, who was the course supervisor, a guy called Dipak, lovely man. And he insisted this was a reference to Thomas Aquinas and faculty psychology. And I said, no, it's a 4. When it's handwritten, a 4 looks like a 9. Some people's handwriting, it's the same mark. He's like, no, it's Thomas Aquinas. So, giving people misunderstood words is just power to the cause.
It's not loving.
That's irrelevant. We'll probably chop that out and use it somewhere else, including me saying we'll use that somewhere else.
There you go.
So I think we've aired quite a lot of things that were I've aired quite a lot of things that are completely irrelevant and at tangents, reactive meandering indeed. But that you've said some very sensible things about love. So on balance, this has been a good evening. So
Cool.
thanks very much for that. And
Yes.
I'm John Atack.
I'm Yuval Laor. And
We'll
yeah, next time.
Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.
I've still got me fingers.